Siebel server. So what are the things present, and how the request come, how it process, like who inside the Siebel server who process this request. So all those things as a developer we have to understand. Okay. So let's understand. It has two part actually. One is something like prior to IP17. IP17 means it is like in 2017, whatever Siebel released, we call it as IP17, Innovation Pack 17. So prior to IP17, how the architecture was, and in IP post IP17, there was in IP17 there was a architectural change happened. It's a major change happened in IP17. So post IP17, what are the changes available? Like nowadays, every company are moving to post IP17 upgrade and all. So we have to understand what is the architectural change happen in between, and what benefit it is giving. So all those things we will understand as part of this slide. Okay. Now let's start. So okay. So what is there inside Siebel server? So if we will go in the inside Siebel server, what we can see is a relational database to store the customer data, administrative data, and repository data. So what is customer data? Customer data is something like what we store, like we open our application, we create the data, like we create account, we create contact, we create service request. So whatever we create, that we call it as customer data. Now what is administrative data? Administrative data is something like to make application run, we have couple of data, like we maintain couple of data like list of value, view responsibility. So there are mm, lot of data we have which we use to run the application, that we call it as administrative data. Let's say I am creating a web service. So creating a web service means we have to maintain a web service somewhere in the database. We have to keep that web service name, that port detail, that endpoint URL. So everything we have to maintain. So those things we call it as and why we are storing this? To make the application better, to run the application. Uh, so we are maintaining. So that is actually we call it as administrative data. And who create the administration? Simple administration or the developer, they create this data. Okay. The end user don't create this data. So that's why we are calling it as administrative data. Now coming to repository data. So what is repository data? Repository data is something like when we let's say I am creating for running the application, we create a lot of objects, like we create applet, we create view, we create table, we create uh, BC. So whatever objects we create in the Siebel tools, that we store inside the repository data. So in the database, we can store three different variety of data, that we call it as relational database. Like we store in the relational database. Okay. So all these three different variety of data we store in a single database, that we call it as relational database. Now coming to a shared directory. Now, what is shared directory? Shared directory is something like there will be a folder where we can keep all our files or our attachment. So all these files will be keeping in a particular path. Okay, which will be using inside the application for running the application, which will be using. Okay. Now, why we are saying it as a shared directory? Now we know that inside a Siebel server there are actually lot of Siebel servers will be present, like server 1, server 2, server 3. Now in a production server, we might have a 6 to 7 different server. Now let's say executive one log into a system in that morning. Okay, like at 10 a.m. he log into the system and he has to upload a customer's PAN card. Now what he did, he just entered to like enter into the application and assume that this user who log into the Siebel application, it connects to Siebel server 1. Okay. Now, if the the agent upload a file, so where it will go and store? It will go and store in the Siebel server 1. Okay. Now, when in the evening he log out and he went, he uploaded a file, the file get kept in inside server, like he did a file attachment, the file gets stored in a server, and assume that this file gets stored in the server 1. He logged into server 1, like he will log into server 1 or server 2 or server 3, that decides by Siebel itself. It's not a user decision that okay, I'll log into Siebel server 1 or something. Okay. Now the file is present inside server 1. Now evening he come back and he want to download this file to check whether this file, what file he uploaded and all these things. Now when he in the evening when he log in, what he found is he like it connect to Civil Server 4. Now here, if the file is present inside Civil Server 1, and he will try to log into Civil Server, he will try to log in into Civil Server 4 and he will try to search this file. It will not show him. So that's why to remove this kind of problem. So what Siebel did is Siebel created a shared path. Shared path means all the Siebel servers will be have access to this particular path, and whenever any file upload will happen or any file we want to keep, it will go and it will get stored in that shared directory. So that's why we are calling it as a shared path. Okay. So this shared path, it will be having inside Siebel server where we can keep all our files. So that is called shared directory. So two things we have understood here. One is the database, one is shared path. Now what else we have? We have Siebel server. So Siebel server is nothing but it's combination of one or more server, and combinedly it will be present like we will be naming one more group to call it as enterprise. Okay. So enterprise will be the server name where we can have server 1, server 2, server 3, like this. A lot of servers will be present. Okay. Now coming to gateway name server. So what is gateway name server? Gateway name server actually it manages the enterprise configuration. So what is enterprise configuration? It is like lot of servers we have. So all those servers have lot of components, and all those components have a lot of parameters. So it is like a too much too much things to remember. Now let's say I have 6 servers. Each server is having 30 to 40 components, and each components are having lot of parameters. So who can remember all these things? Okay. To make it easy to make all these things remember, there will be a Siebel gateway name server, and Siebel gateway name server will be keeping remember all these things. Okay. So that's why we are saying it as a Siebel gateway name server. So it's kind of a security person. Like in an apartment, we have security. Okay. So whenever a person want to meet, what he does, he go to security first, saying that okay, I want to meet Susil Behr. So what happens? When he went to the apartment, he asked to security. Then security knows that okay, Susil Behr is staying at E405. So so for this, security will be knowing that okay, which component, like whenever a request comes, Siebel gateway name server has the information that okay, which component present in which server. So from this, it will redirect that okay, you go to server 1 or server 2 or server 3. So those things actually taken care by Siebel gateway name server. So that's why we are naming it as a Siebel gateway name server. Now, what else we have? We have web server, we have web server extension SWSE, and we have web browser. So, what is web server? Web server is nothing but it's a third party server where we it can be Apache, it can be IIS, Microsoft IIS. So, this third party server which will be give the connectivity between the browser to Siebel server. Okay. So, how the connectivity will happen? in the web server, there will be web server extension, Siebel web server extension. So now coming to what is this Siebel web server extension? Siebel web server extension is nothing but it's the extra installable which get installed in the web server. Okay. Now it's extra software which will install inside the Siebel server to give the connectivity between the browser to Siebel server. So that's why we are calling it as a Siebel web server extension. Okay. Now after this web server extension, we will be like the web browser. What is web browser? Web browser is nothing but it is like the uh, Mozilla Firefox or Google Chrome, from where we open our application, that we call it as web browser. Okay. So hope it's clear about what are the things present inside the SQL server. Okay. So we will understand one after another what are these things and how the request process. Now let's move to next slide. Yeah, this is a typical Siebel server architectural block. Okay. Now, if you will see on the top, there is external web client. Okay. So these are nothing but these are the browser from where we open our application. Okay. One will be external web client, one will be internal web client, one will be mobile web client. Now, what is the difference between these three: external web client, internal web client, and mobile web client? So external web client, this is nothing but what happens when we let's say there like when we open our application, there will be security zone. Okay. So how organization get work? It is like when we go inside to a organization, there will be a security zone and all the civil application will be available inside that security zone. Okay. So it is like intranet. Like when you work inside your application, inside your organization, you have to connect it to a VPN, or you will be going to a dedicated ODC where we can uh, connect to our application. From internet, this application will be not available. Okay. So that's why we are saying it as okay, from this system or from this network, you can connect it to your application. Like nowadays the people are working from home, so what they did, they go to a Citrix connection, or say they go to a VPN connection, then only they will be able to open their application. So why this is so? This is to enable of the intranet, so that you can connect to your system and you can do your work from all other internet, from all across internet. No one will be able to access to our Siebel application. This is for security purpose. So that we call it as internal web client. Okay. So internal web client we have understood. Now what is external web client? External web client is nothing but it is like sometimes what happens. Let's say there are store. Okay. Or store means there are it's a garment store. Okay. Now all across India, let's say there are 600 garment store this company is having. Okay. Now, how they will enable all these 600 stores? So what it will happen is like there are two ways. They can give VPN connection, they can give the intranet, and they can connect. Okay. Else they what they can do is they can they can connect from internet directly, but there will be extra security feature for this, because only those 600 stores who are having like where the Siebel software, like they want to connect to Siebel application from their system IP, they will be keeping all those IPs, and there will be extra layer of security that we call it as firewall. Okay. So in the firewall, there they can maintain that okay, only these 600 IPs are allowed to connect to Siebel application from internet. Okay. So what we are doing is we are doing a extra level of security to make it extra level of security to make it that okay, only our accessible systems are able to connect to Siebel server, all other systems are not able to connect. So in the firewall, there will be lot of rules written, and inside that rules we can bypass that okay, these IPs are accessible, all other IPs are not accessible. So that let's say someone third party people he want to connect to Siebel application, to our Siebel application, he will not able to access because that IP is like from the IP which is he want to connect, that will be not access. It will not give permission to get connected to the Siebel application. So that's why we have firewall. Okay. So I hope it is clear the external web client and internal web client. Now mobile web client. Mobile web client is nothing but dedicated web client. So what this does? So inside the Siebel server, we can install the application where the application will be like there will be an application icon, and we can double click and we can open our application by connecting our database and connecting. This is actually used by the pure hardcore developer or admin. Okay, now let's say server is down. Okay, and no one will able to access this application, but admin people required to do deployment, or developer need to add a couple of things. So during that time they can connect to dedicated client and they can do the modification. Okay, so that's why we call it as mobile web client. Okay, so these three variety of client we have understood. So one is external, one is internal. The difference between external internal is that there was a firewall layer for internet. Okay, so that is external. Now web client we have understood. Now what happens next? Next is web server load balancing. So the request from browser, the request came to web server. The web server there is a load balancer to make it smooth. Like now, let's say there are 100 number of requests coming or 500 number of requests coming. So load balancing will decide that okay, this request it will go to web server 1. Okay, now let's say web server 1 is occupied with the 70 number of requests. Now web server 2 is having only 2 3 number of requests. So what it will do? Okay, it is less loaded, so let's route to this web server 2. Okay, so like this the web server load balancer, and this web server is do nothing. It is like in other application, let's say like Java or .NET or some other application, web server actually deploy this, and web server do all these activity like the entire application running and all, web server do. But here in Siebel application, Siebel itself is a robust application. So like what the Siebel, like whenever a request come, web server action item is to route to this request to Siebel server. That's it. Okay. So it's just kind of a message. Okay. So it pass the message to the Siebel server, and Siebel server take care the remaining part. Okay. Now once the Siebel like Siebel server web server actually pass this request, where the request will go? First of all, it will go to Siebel gateway name server, and from Siebel gateway name server, it will identify where to go. Okay. So now after Siebel gateway name server, in Siebel gateway name server, there is a file called cbins.dat file. We have to remember this. So this cbins.dat file is actually keeping which component present inside which server. Now this thing, it identify that okay, request is coming, it identify that okay, you are need to reach to the application object manager. It's a server component. Okay, now application object manager is available in server 1, server 2, server 3. So it will redirect the request to any of this server. Okay, server 1, server 2, server 3. Okay, these things are get done by Siebel gateway name server. Okay. Now once this request reach to application object manager, now application object manager know what to do, and it process this request. It will give the response, and the response also return back the same fashion how the request came. Okay, so it will go to Siebel gateway name server, it will go to web server, it will go to client. Okay, so this is how the request flows. Okay, so this is the high level Siebel server architectural diagram, and for making this request and response possible, there is a database, there is a file system. So all these things we have will understand one after another. Okay, is it clear? Okay. Now let's move to next slide. Okay, this slide is same as the previous slide. I just make it a little bit easier to make you people understand. Okay, so external same thing. External web client, internal web client, mobile web client. It will go to firewall. The like external in between external web client and the web server, there is a firewall. Now we have web server. Web server load balancer is present to make it a load balance. Now all the request will go to Siebel gateway name server. Now Siebel gateway name server will have a file called cbinstall.dat file, which identifies that okay, which server component present inside which server. Now it will go to, now let's say request is I need to identify that okay, I want to go to of the application object manager. Now, this application object manager, it will go to the server one, because the Siebel gateway name server will identify that in server one, the application object manager is present. So that's why it will go to application object manager. Okay. Now it connect to DB, connect to file system, connect to tools, all these things we have understood. Okay. Now, let's move to next. Okay. Now database is like there are different variety of database available in the market. So we have IBM DB2, we have Microsoft SQL Server, we have Oracle server. Like there are different variety of the Siebel database available. We can use any of this DB. Okay. Now move to next, file system. So file system, I told what is the requirement of file system. So it keeps the file. Okay. Now thing is, file system is not a single folder where it will be placing all or dumping all the files inside a single folder. It will be difficult for Siebel to figure it out or find it out. Okay, so it's not a single folder. It's actually a hierarchy folder where it will be having lot of subfolders, and the files will be keeping on those subfolders. Okay, so that it will make it easy for people or for Siebel to find the files. Okay, that's why it's not a single folder. It will be a hierarchical folder structure where we can keep our files. Okay, or Siebel can keep our files. Okay, now enterprise. Enterprise is nothing but it is like the server. It is not a server. Okay, enterprise server is not a piece of software but merely logical collection of Siebel servers that access to the same database and file system, and which are managed by a single Siebel gateway name server. So it is like couple of Siebel servers. It will be combinedly presenting inside a enterprise, and we will be naming that enterprise. Okay. So this is combination of couple of servers. Okay. Now Siebel gateway name server. So you have understood earlier. Now what it is saying? The Siebel enterprise may consist of dozen of Siebel servers. It is like n number of Siebel servers we are having. Now each running dozen of components. Now program which implements, like what is component? Component is nothing but program which implement the specific functionality. Like each component will be having separate functionality. Now, each of these components has different parameter value. It holds to easily manage all these information across the entire enterprise. Now, Siebel has developed the gateway name server. It is a service or daemon process that stores the entire enterprise configuration in a text file named as cbins.dat file. So, what cbins.dat file stores? It stores the entire configuration details. Okay. Now, I'll give you an example to make you understand that what is the importance of Siebel server. Okay. Now, when we do SRF deployment, during that time, we have to down our Siebel server. Down means we have to uh, we have to shut down our Siebel servers and we have to up our Siebel server. So during that time, there is a process we follow. What we do, we down the Siebel server first, then we down the Siebel gateway name server. Now, then we up the Siebel gateway name server, then we up the Siebel server. Now, why it is so? What is the significance of doing so? Okay, if let's say I'll down the Siebel server and gateway name server, and then while upping, I'll up the Siebel server first, then I will up the gateway name server. But it will give us a error and it will not allow us to get it up. So why it is so? Because when Siebel servers get up, it requires the component parameters detail. And who stores this component parameters detail? The gateway name server, cbeans.dat file. Okay. So while Siebel server is getting up, it will not able to find all those server component detail. Okay. So when getting down, the Siebel name gateway name server should be up. When getting up, the gateway name server should be up. Okay. So now the flow will be like we will be down the Siebel server first, then gateway name server, and we will be upping the gateway name server first, then we can up the Siebel server. So the importance of this is Siebel gateway name server has the component details, component parameter details, so that Siebel will able to utilize those component parameter details from cbeans.dat file. Okay. Now, so gateway name server. So what we have understood till now, we have understood the database, the file system, the Siebel enterprise, the gateway name server, and uh, Siebel.dat. Okay. Now, let's understand the Siebel server. So, inside Siebel server, there are n number of components present. Okay. Now, what this component do? Okay. The Siebel server hosts so-called components that implemented the various pieces of Siebel functionality, such as providing end user connection, uploading files to Siebel file system, exchanging data with external system, and a lot of activity. Each component has its own activity. It follows those things. Okay. Now, what are those important components present inside Siebel server? We will understand. First is the application object manager. Now, what is application object manager? Application object manager is nothing but it is like the whenever whatever request we do from the browser, like what we do inside Siebel application, we open the application from a browser, and then what we do, we we log in by we give the username password, we click the login button, it will go inside the Siebel server, we click new button to create a new record, we click delete button to delete a record. So something we are doing by clicking, and when we click, then we are sending a request to Siebel server. Now, someone inside the Siebel server, someone should present who will receive our request and process our request and give us a response. So, who is that component? So, that component is application object manager. So, anything we do in the application browser, like we click anywhere, we drill down anywhere, we navigate from one screen to other screen, whatever we do from the browser, from the UI, that request will go to application object manager. Now, application object manager, what it will do is it will create it will process our request, and it will do what user supposed to see, and it will respond back that okay, user need to see. Okay. Now, we'll take an example how application object manager do actually. So we'll understand all these components one after another. So we have application object manager, we have configuration parameter, we have data manager, we have SRF file, we have SWE. SWE is nothing but a Siebel web engine and Siebel web template. So what are these things, we will understand one after another. Okay. Now, Coming to the application object manager. So I explained what is application object manager. Now let's say somebody trying to log into the Siebel application. Okay, so what he will he will give the URL, and he will press the username, he will give the password, and he will click login button. Once he click the login button, what he is doing from the browser, he is sending a request to give the permission to enter inside the Siebel application. Now, once he click the login button, a request will go to application object manager. Now, what application object manager will do is it will understand that okay, this request is coming from login page and a username password is coming. Now, there are lot of way to validate that this username and password is correct or not. Okay, so application object manager, first of all, it will validate that okay, whatever login name and password is entered by user, it is correct or not. Let's say it validated that okay, this username password is correct. Now what application object manager need to give the response? It's supposed to give the response of home page. So user able to see the home page of application, like the application. Now the home page, it should contain couple of things, like it will be having three applet, one view, couple of data. So it's supposed to get create. Who will create? There are other server components who will help application object manager to build the home page. And once the home page get built, then application object manager will keep that what user supposed to see. User supposed to see the home page. So once the home page get built, then application object manager give that a response to browser so that the user will able to see the home page. Okay, so that actually does by the application object manager. Okay, now configuration parameter. So configuration parameter is nothing but inside Siebel server, there are server component, there are lot of objects with it. Okay. Now these parameters, like we have we know that there are different variety of Siebel application. Now one is sales, let's say the one is telecom application, one is loyalty application, one is so there are different variety of applications. So how we can segregate that? Okay, this is telecom application, this behaves like this, or this is loyalty application, this behaves like this, this parameter value will be this thing. So where we will be keeping these things? So application wise it will be different, so the parameter value will be also different. So there will be a CFG file which identify or which says that okay, if it if it is telecom application or if it is order management application, this parameter value it will have. If it is the loyalty application, this parameter value it will be have. So all those things will be keeping in the CFG file. Okay, CFG file actually identify the application parameter details. Okay, so we call it as configuration parameter file, CFG. Okay, configuration parameter file. Okay, now let's move to next. Now data manager actually what it does, in the back end, like, now let's say application object manager is trying to get the data. So how it will create, how will it will try to get the data? It will generate a vendor specific SQL. So what does a vendor specific SQL like? What is the vendor specific SQL? So vendor specific SQL is nothing but, now let's say as a human being, forget about Siebel application, as a human being, how we connect to database? We have a SQL developer, we have a Toad to connect to database. What we do? We write the SQLs to get the data, to understand that okay, like let's say I want to see the account data, I'll go to Toad or I'll go to SQL developer and I'll write that the select star from Siebel dot s underscore org underscore ext. So this is a SQL we are writing as a user. Now how Siebel connects? Siebel also prepare this kind of query. Okay, so who prepared this query? The data manager. Data manager responsibility. So any data we want to connect from the database, any data we want to see from the database, data manager will prepare the query. It will execute this query to the database, and whatever data receives, it will take those data and send it to application object manager. Okay, so this the data manager or data manager's responsibility to prepare the query, get the data, and show it to application object manager. Now, Siebel repository file. Repository file is nothing but whatever objects we create, these repository files are combinedly, it's a single file which will be holding all our repository objects. Like object means applet, view, screen, a table. So whatever objects we create, those things we keep it in the Siebel repository, and it's a single file. We deploy. Let's say there is a requirement. We created a applet, we created a PC, we created a view, and once we created in the tools, that does not mean that it is available in the database, but that does not mean that it will show in the application. To make it show in the application, what we'll do, we'll compile these objects to the repository file. Repository file means SRF file, and we'll deploy that SRF file in the application. Then only we will be able to see our application. Else it will not show in the application. Okay, so that's why we are saying it as a simple repository file. Okay, so this repository file is to make available all our objects in the application. Okay, let's move to next. Siebel Web Engine. Now, in the application object manager login page, during that time, what we have understood, someone helps to create or build the result page. Now, that someone is nothing but the Siebel SWE. Okay, Siebel Web Engine. So, Web Engine, what it does, uh, its requirement is to create the build the home page. Okay, now how it built? Actually, inside Siebel server, there are couple of web template. Okay, SWT. In the next slide, we have what is SWT. Okay. So SWT is nothing but these are the template file. Now, let's say there is a list applet, or there is a form applet, or there is a view. So these are actually defined by Siebel, how a list applet should look like, how a form applet should look like. So all those things are defined already. Okay. Now, application object manager says that okay, you build the home page. Now, who will build the home page? SWE. Okay. Now, the SWE, what it does is it identifies that there are 4 applets inside it, and there are one view, and all this data need to populate inside these applets. So it read the data how the web template from web template how the applet should be look like. It read and it built the result page. Okay, so the building the result page is the concern of SWE. Okay, now Siebel web engine will able to create this result page, and it will give back to application object manager, and application object manager will give the response. So SW is the request, is the person who or is the component who built our result page. Okay. Now what it take helps? It take help from SWT file, and this SWT file are nothing but these are actually the template file, how a applet should look like, how a list applet should look like, how a form applet should look like, how a detailed view should look like. So those things are actually coded already written in the SWT file. These are HTML code kind of it is written. Okay, so that SWE will read this SWT file and it will build the result page. Okay, clear. So these components are present inside the Siebel server. Okay, so we'll revise just one more time. So there are application object manager. Anything we do from the UI, application object manager is the responsible component to build our result page. Now coming to configuration parameter. Configuration parameter is application specific. There are lot of parameter details we have, which we store in a text file. and we rename it as a configuration file. Okay, CFG file. Okay. Now coming to data manager. Data manager, it is the component who actually generates the vendor specific vendor specific SQLs to get the data from the database, and it retrieve the data. Okay. So that is data manager responsibility. Now coming to SRF file. SRF file is nothing but it combinedly storing all our objects in a single file, that we call it as SRF file. Now coming to SWE. SWE is nothing but the responsible component who built our result page, and it used take the help of SWT file. Okay, fine. Now coming to web server. So web server is nothing as the entire communication with the browser to the end user. Computer has to be end user computer has to be done via HTTP. Okay. Now a web server is vital part of the Siebel web server architecture. The CRM supports a variety of vendors and products such as Microsoft IIS, HP web server. So these are these different web servers, third party web servers which we use. Okay. Now the web server has to exist but does not need to take heavy load. So web server don't take too much load. Okay. As we have seen the above, the application object manager handles the incoming request. So the web server only task is to pass the request to the application object manager and pass back the result to the end user browser. So web server, what it does, it send the request from web server browser to application object manager and give back the response from application object manager to browser. Okay. Now web server extension. So what is this web server extension? Web server extension is nothing but this is enables the web server to communicate with the object manager on the various Siebel server. Okay. Now the Siebel SWAC as a plugin. So plugin means it's extra installable or extra part of which we do inside the web server, and enables the web server to forward incoming request URL from end user browser to application object manager Siebel server. Okay. So this connectivity are actually get stored inside the web server extension. Okay. So how this connectivity happens actually? Now web server, let's say request goes to web server. So web server supposed to know that okay, I have to go to this particular Siebel server. So how it will identify? Like who will keep this information? The web server extension. Inside web server extension, there will be a file called eapps.cfg file. Okay. Now this eapps.cfg file will actually stores the information where to connect. What is the connection street? So those connection are actually get stored inside the eapps.cfg file. Okay. Now let's understand the diagrammatically. Okay. So this is the diagram where we will understand how the connectivity happens. Okay. Now when we open our application, there will be a URL. So URL will be having two parts. One is the web server. So first will be web server IP or web server name. Then we will be having application object manager details like call center underscore ENU. So this is the application object manager detail. Okay. Now what happens whenever we will be entering the URL? First part, it identify that okay, we have to go to this web server. The request will directly go to the web server. Okay. Now inside web server, there will be one more installable, or there will be one piece of software which is called SWAC. Now in this inside this web server SWAC, there will be a file called eapps.cfg file. Inside this eapps.cfg file, we will be having the connection thing. Now what is this connection thing? Now inside eapps.cfg file, we will be having it's a text file kind of. We'll be having this detail call center underscore ENU. So it will go and search the call center in ENU and find the connection string. Here it will find out that what is the server IP details. So what is the Siebel server IP and port So all these things it will able to find it from EF.cfg. From there it will able to connect to the Siebel's application, Siebel server, and it will process our request. Okay. So this is how the request actually flows. Okay. So the connectivity happens from browser to Siebel server. Okay. Okay. So this is all about the server architecture, which is being worked from 2000 early, like very early 2002 till now, IP17. Okay. Now post IP17, what happens is there is a major change happened. So as a developer, we have to understand that from IP17 onwards, what are the change happened and what benefited we get. Why Siebel did this major change. So those things we'll understand now. So post IP17, what are the architecture? From the above, we have understood that gateway name server, Siebel server, uh, and a Siebel web server extension. Okay, so these things we have understood. Now post IP17, components include the gateway server, the Siebel server, and application interface or AI. Okay, so Siebel introduced one more component called AI. Okay, now earlier what we had is the web server. Okay, now web server was a third party web server. So we are using IIS or we are using Apache Tomcat. So these are different third party web server we have. But post IP17, this web server concept they have removed. Okay, what they did is they did AI. Okay, application interface, where inside AI we will be having inbuilt web server. Okay, so it will take care the those things. Okay, so that's why they have introduced AI. Now they have inside this AI we can install web server, we can install REST API, anything we want we can install. Okay, so that's why they make it as AI. Now, what else we have? We have gateway. Earlier it was gateway name server. Now it changed to gateway. Okay, and Siebel server. We know Siebel server. Okay. Now we'll understand one after another. What are the benefit it gives? Okay. Now, what is AI actually? The new Siebel application interface replaced the Siebel web server extension. So we have understood during our previous slide what is web server extensions. Okay, so this replaced the web server extension. Now what AI does is the application interface replaced the web server extension with a self-contained internal web server, which includes application container functionality and is installed in the installed with the Siebel Enterprise installer. So when we install our Siebel Enterprise, during that time, this web server also get installed automatically. Okay. Earlier we have to install the web server separately, but now this because it is internal, because it is combinedly coming. So this web server are get installed as part of AI installation. Okay. Now there is no longer any usage of third-party web server platform. So they are not using the third-party web server platform like IIS, iPlanet, IBM HTTP server. So these are not being used. The same web server is installed on all supported operating system for a uh, consistent WebTR across all platforms. Okay. Now, the application interface configuration is stored within Siebel Gateway registry. Okay, and the configuration is performed using the Siebel using the new Siebel management console. So there is a management console. We call it as SMC. Okay, Siebel management console. So when after IP17 onwards, when we install our Siebel server, there will be a URL called the Siebel SMC. We will be opening the Siebel SMC first to make our application up or do the configurational change or add the component parameter details. So those things are actually maintained by Siebel Management Console (SMC). Okay. Prior custom web template have now been moved to Siebel repository and configured via Siebel tools. Earlier, web templates are a different thing, and it was not present inside Siebel repository. It was a separate web temple folder where we will be keeping all our web temple file. Okay. So those things are moved to from post IP17. What happens is all those web templates are actually went to the tools like repository specific. Okay, so it went to repository. So this is about the AI. Okay, these are actually architectural changes happen inside the SQL Server post IP17. Okay, now let's see what else the changes happened. Now gateway. So Siebel Gateway replaced the Gateway Name Server. So earlier it was Siebel Gateway Name Server. Now it's changed as a Siebel Gateway. The gateway performs many of these functions as before. Okay, so gateway, whatever gateway name server was doing, Siebel Gateway also do those same tasks, but utilize the application container functionality to manage communication to other modules. Now, configuration data is stored internally to the Siebel gateway, okay, using Apache Zookeeper to maintain the registry. The previous cbeans.dat file is no longer utilized. So what we have understood in the previous slide, we have understood that the Siebel gateway name server will be having a file called cbeans.dat, which will be keeping all our component detail, or which will be keeping all our server parameter values in a text file that is called cbeans.dat file. Now, after IP17, this cbeans.dat file are not being utilized, and Zookeeper. So, like we have in the AI, there will be a zookeeper who will be keeping all our maintain our register. Okay. Now, one of the additional functions, no, one of the additional functions the new Siebel gateway performs in the internal Siebel native load balancing. Okay. So when user request hit the application interface like AI, it will send a request to gateway, which will return a connection connect string to the list loaded application object manager that supports the request, the user session, with which then utilize this AOM. Okay, so earlier the connection strings and all these things were actually happened by SWAC. Now gateway has this capacity to do all these things. Okay. So gateway these all this activity. Now, internal configuration parameter of the Siebel gateway is done during installation wizard. Further configuration is done with the Siebel management console (SMC). This replaced the previous configuration wizard to configure the Siebel gateway name server. So when earlier we were having the configuration details in a separate tab, which we can configure it in the SMC. Okay, management console. Now, Siebel server. The major change of Siebel server is runtime repository. So earlier we have SRF file. Okay. So the SRF file we will deploy and the changes will reflect in the application. Now we have the runtime repository. Okay. Now there is no compilation and deploy SRF file. So these things are actually removed. Okay. So because of above changes, the Siebel introduced two kind of repository, like development repository and runtime repository. Okay. So because of this above changes, Siebel need to introduce two kind of repository. One is development repository (DR) and one is runtime repository (RR). Okay. Now developer repository is nothing but DR implemented in the development environment when we have the Siebel tools and we will able to create or modify the objects. So this is DR environment. Now what is RR environment? RR environment is nothing but it is higher environments where there will be no tools, okay, and the deployment only can happen by admin team, okay. So there will be no tools to modify any object in the higher environment like in the production or UAT. So all those environment don't require any tools actually. Okay. So whatever object modify in the dev environment, what we will do, we will move all those changes by RR environment. Okay. So that's why they have introduced this. All this implementation is to make zero downtime deployment and cloud ready. Okay. So all these changes they did because there are a lot of competitors, CRM competitors available in the market who actually make the CRM application in the cloud. Okay. So Siebel also wants to move to cloud. So to make it cloud ready, all these changes actually they have implemented. Okay. Yeah. Now let's move to next. Okay. So what is as part of this architectural change, there is something they have introduced that is called SSL certificate. Okay. So from IP17 onwards, they have implemented this SSL certificate. So what is this SSL certificate? A new requirement of IP17 is the creation and storing of SSL certificate to communicate between different enterprise components. Okay, the web browser utilize SSL to communicate with the application interface. The application interface utilize SSL to communicate between itself and gateway servers. So this communication in between happens by only the SSL certificate. If we will not install SSL certificate or will not give the SSL certificate, it will able to give will not able to connect and it will give us error. Okay. So this is also important as they did a major change to make it certified, make it correct, and make it to this certificate is identify that okay you are these applications are authorized or these applications are proper. Okay. Now SMC. So the new Siebel Management Console is a web-based utility that replaced the previously used enterprise configuration wizard and the most configurations. Okay. Now the management console used is to configure the Siebel gateway, Siebel enterprise, and Siebel server security profile, application interface, and a few other modules. So SMC is to configure all these details. It will help us to configure all these details. That we call it as SMC. Now Siebel Web Tools. Okay. Okay. The Siebel introduced the Siebel Web Tools, which can be logged in by developer from URL. Okay, no local tool setup is required for this. Okay, so Siebel Web Tools, it is like we can open our earlier we have to install the Siebel Web Tools in our system, then only we can open the web tools. But nowadays, like IP17 onwards, they have introduced. It is not exactly introduced in IP17; it is introduced in IP16 also. But it was not so much utilized. Like there are a lot of changes, a lot of modification was required in IP16. So IP17 onwards, officially they have released the web tools where people no need to install the tools in their system. They can connect to Siebel tools by using the URL. Okay. So installations, it removes the dependency of installation and the local DB extraction and all these things. Dependency are actually get removed. Okay. Now, so this web tools, what benefit it brings? This implemented to remove the dependency of DBA file generation, local exe creation of each user. So all these things actually it get removed. Okay. By implementing this, Siebel can be cloud ready. So it can be like we can anywhere from the world we can connect to Siebel tools by using the URL. So that's why it make it implemented. Okay. Now from the any system we can connect and we can do the tool specific changes. Okay. Even like let's say you are accessible from mobile, you can connect from mobile and you can see the different changes. But tools it is not possible from in mobile. uh, Android application you cannot connect. You can install the Siebel tools, all those things. Okay, so these are actually they modified from IP17 onwards. Now, workspace concept is introduced in both traditional tool and web tools. So it is not like traditional tool is being removed. Traditional tools is also there and web tools also introduced. Now here there is no SRF decompilation. Okay, so how things are work, how things are get done. There is no dedicated client. Also, they have though we have dedicated client, but the people don't use this dedicated client because they have introduced a new concept called workspace. Okay, so workspace is something like in the tools we will be creating our workspace. So what it will do is it will create a copy from our main workspace. Okay, so in it will create a fresh copy from our main workspace, and what we can do is we can create modify our objects and we can deploy this the changes to main workspace. Now in between, let's say I want to see or I want to understand that whatever changes I did, is it working or not working. How I can do, I can connect to my application, I can open my workspace and I can make it inspect. So once I will do inspect, I can see all our changes in my application. Okay, so that it is like no dependency of deployment, no dependency on admin team. So we instantly we can check our changes inside application by opening the workspace. Okay, so these are the changes which happened at a developer perspective to make us benefited. Okay. Okay, so this is all about the IP17 changes. Okay, so we have understood what are the architectural changes prior to IP17, post IP17. Okay, so for today we are keeping this much. Okay, so I really appreciate if you like, share and subscribe to my channel. Okay, so any things you want to understand more about the Siebel and any topic you want me to cover inside Siebel, so do comments in the video session so that we'll try to cover. So very soon we are coming up with all new topics, and we are planning to make it like the upgrade, how upgrade happens and all these things. So we are making plan to make it available in this channel. Okay, so thank you for seeing my video, and thanks all for that.